At a charity gala, my sister-in-law whispered, "You don't belong here with these people." I leaned in and said, "Maybe you're right, I'm actually hosting this event. Didn't you see the banner with my name on it? I'm 47, female, divorced, and in a very different phase of life than I ever expected to be. I met my ex-husband, Patrick, when I was 22, during my senior year at Georgetown. I was a political science major, originally planning on going to Columbia Law after graduation. He was 2 years older, already in a fast-track MBA program, with the kind of competence that made you feel like he could hold the whole world in one hand and still have a finger left to point at you with. He came from old DC money. I didn't. My parents were humble, blue-collar people who believed in hard work, Sunday dinners, and not airing your dirty laundry in public. My dad was a sanitation supervisor for the city. My mom ran a tailoring shop out of the front of our row house in Alexandria. We were proud, honest, and invisible, the kind of people society overlooks until something breaks. Patrick noticed me one day after a university lecture, asked if I wanted to grab coffee, and within 2 months, we were inseparable. I ignored the little warning signs early on, how he'd talk over me in front of his friends, or how he introduced me to his parents like I was his charity project. His mother, Celeste, was a socialite straight out of an Edith Wharton novel. All pearls and pursed lips. She'd once asked if I'd ever eaten pâté where you're from. I laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. Then there was his sister, Fiona. She was 2 years younger than Patrick, a former debutante who took herself more seriously than most politicians. If you asked her what she did for a living, she'd say she handled image strategy for a fashion PR firm, but I'm pretty sure that meant she posted Instagram photos of herself at places she didn't actually like. From day one, she was polite in that way that's somehow worse than being rude, always smiling, always making you feel like she knew something you didn't. Still, I was in love. I shelved the Columbia offer and moved to Manhattan with Patrick after graduation. He got a job with a private equity firm, and I found work at a nonprofit legal aid office. The pay was laughable, the hours were long, but the work felt good. Real. We got married in a ceremony that looked like something out of Town and Country magazine. I wore a $3,000 gown I didn't pick, and we said our vows under a crystal chandelier imported from Milan. I remember standing next to him, smiling, feeling like I was watching my life from far away. Years passed. I gave up my job after our second child was born. It wasn't really discussed, just assumed. Patrick didn't want a nanny raising our kids, but of course, he was never home anyway. He worked late. Traveled constantly. Providing, he called it. We had 2 kids, Alina and Brennan. They were my whole world. Raising them was a joy, but also an erasure. I lost pieces of myself year by year. Friends drifted. I stopped reading books. I started hiding shopping bags in the trunk of my car because even though Patrick made more money than I could comprehend, he'd sigh every time I spent another $100 on throw pillows. I think I stayed quiet for so long because I honestly believed that was the trade-off. Love him, raise the kids, don't rock the boat. But slowly, I started rebuilding something of my own. I volunteered again at the same kind of legal aid clinics I used to work for. It started small, helping women navigate custody paperwork, connecting them with shelters or translators. Then I started fundraising. Writing grant applications. Hosting quiet luncheons in our apartment while Patrick was away. Eventually, I launched a foundation that specialized in helping women, particularly immigrants, get access to legal representation in domestic violence cases. I called it the Verity Fund. It grew faster than I imagined. By the time my son was in high school, I had 2 part-time staff members, a social worker, and enough funding to support 24 active clients a month. But I kept it all quiet. I didn't need Patrick's validation, or worse, his interference. He didn't ask much about what I did anyway. We lived in the same apartment, but in different lives. We ate dinner separately. Slept in separate rooms eventually. I don't think I ever decided to fall out of love, it just eroded, one chipped interaction at a time. Then came the affair. Or rather, the confirmation of it. I found a text on his phone from someone saved as Melinda R. It was very much not a business conversation. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. Just looked at me like I was being irrational for caring. "We haven't touched each other in years, Noelle," he said. "This can't be a surprise." He didn't apologize. He didn't even look sorry. That was when something cracked open in me. Not broken, more like unlatched. Like a window that had been painted shut for years finally swinging open. I called a lawyer the next day. The divorce was surgical. I kept things civil because of the kids. Thankfully, our prenup, which his family had insisted on, included a clause that worked in my favor: anything I built independently was mine. Since I'd never used his name or money for the Verity Fund, I kept the foundation. I also got the apartment and primary custody of the kids, who were old enough to voice their preferences. Patrick barely fought. He was already dating a much younger wellness coach named Mairead by then. Yes, that's real. Yes, she uses crystal-infused water bottles. It took me a year to feel like myself again. But when I did, I felt stronger than I ever had. I began speaking at panels, partnering with other nonprofits, even testifying before a state subcommittee about barriers to legal access for low-income women. My foundation was growing fast, and the right people were noticing. Which brings me to the charity gala. The Greenwich Hill Club hosts an annual gala that's practically royalty in New England social circles. For years, I attended as Patrick's silent plus one. I smiled, nodded, and drank overpriced champagne while Fiona made snide comments about my shoes or asked if I'd ever consider rejoining the workforce. But this year was different. The Verity Fund had been selected as the gala's main beneficiary, and Noelle, the girl from Alexandria who gave up law school and spent 20 years being treated like a coat rack with a smile, was co-hosting the event. My name was on the banners. The programs. Even the branded chocolates on the dessert plates. I wore a navy silk gown with a slit I would have been too shy to wear 10 years ago. My hair was pulled back in a chignon, and I had a deep red lipstick I picked because it made me feel unmissable. I was greeting donors near the ballroom entrance when Fiona appeared. She looked tired. Still beautiful in that curated, editorial way. But the years were starting to catch up. There was something brittle behind her eyes, like glass that had been handled too much. She leaned in close. Smiled. And said, "You don't belong here with these people." I didn't flinch. I smiled back. "Maybe you're right," I said. "I'm actually hosting this event. Didn't you see the banner with my name on it?" I turned and walked away before she could respond. I spent the rest of the night shaking hands, giving a short speech, and watching as we raised over $3 million. But more than that, I watched people who used to glance past me, suddenly seek me out. Ask me questions. Thank you. I hadn't just rebuilt my life. I'd claimed it. And Fiona? She had to watch from the sidelines, stunned silent for the first time I could remember. The days after the gala felt surreal. My phone didn't stop buzzing for a week. Donors, board members, other foundations. The speech I gave, just 5 minutes long, had apparently struck a chord. People were forwarding the livestream clip. Someone uploaded it to YouTube. A colleague from Chicago said she'd seen it shared in a private legal advocacy Facebook group. One message stood out, from a woman who had once stayed in a shelter we funded: "I didn't know someone like you was fighting for people like me. Thank you." I read that one 3 times and cried. The high from that night lingered, but life didn't magically become glamorous. There were still early mornings packing school lunches and late nights rewriting grant reports. I still had to argue with the bank about a payment delay on our new Newark satellite office, and one of our main caseworkers went on sudden maternity leave, which sent our intake schedule into chaos. The difference was, it all felt worth it. What was unexpected, though, was how people in Patrick's circle began circling me again. That same group of women who used to exchange side glances when I mentioned my nonprofit work now wanted coffee dates and collaborative brainstorming sessions. People who once considered me a tag-along now wanted access. It was flattering, sure, but it also made me furious in ways I hadn't anticipated. Where were they when I spent Christmas Eve helping a woman flee her abuser with 2 kids in tow? When I sat at my kitchen table drafting bylaws while Patrick mocked me from across the apartment, asking if I was playing lawyer again? When I sat through fundraisers in borrowed dresses, nodding politely while Fiona and her friends talked about the burden of managing house staff? I was polite. Cordial. But distant. I had nothing to prove anymore, and it showed. A few weeks later, Fiona invited me to brunch. It came in the form of a handwritten card, monogrammed, of course, delivered via courier to my office. The note read, "Noelle, I thought it might be nice for us to reconnect. Just us, no families, no formalities. I admire everything you've built. Let's talk. I'll be at Fresh, Thursday at 11. Hope to see you there. F. I showed it to my assistant, who rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might fall over. That's a PR move if I've ever seen one, she said. Still, curiosity got the best of me. I went. Fresh is one of those ultra-minimalist cafes in Tribeca where you pay $16 for a slice of avocado toast and water comes in a glass bottle that looks like it belongs in a chemistry lab. Fiona was already seated, sipping espresso, her bag on the chair next to her like it needed its own place at the table. She stood to greet me, air-kissed my cheek, and complimented my shoes before we even sat down. She started with flattery, how poised I was at the gala, how well-spoken. She told me she'd watched my speech twice and thought it was so authentic. I smiled politely and stirred my tea. Then she asked if I'd be open to collaborating on an event together. Something for women's wellness and empowerment, sponsored by her firm. And that's when it hit me, she didn't want reconciliation. She wanted proximity. To credibility. To the attention I was getting. She wanted to stand next to me under lights she didn't help turn on, and pose like she helped build the stage. I gave her the kindest version of a no I could muster. I think we're working toward very different things, Fiona. But thank you for thinking of me. She didn't press, but her smile froze a little at the edges. Well, she said, adjusting her collar, if you ever change your mind, I think we could do something really elegant together. I nodded and left 20 minutes later. I haven't heard from her since. Meanwhile, Patrick resurfaced in the way I expected, not with an apology, but with an ask. He sent an email through his assistant about a potential cross-promotion opportunity between his company's new philanthropic division and the Verity Fund. I didn't reply. My staff knew better than to pursue it. I learned something, you know? People like Patrick and Fiona, they don't change when you succeed. They just shift. They reframe you in their minds as a resource, not a partner. Their respect is transactional. Their attention is opportunistic. That clarity is both heartbreaking and freeing. I poured everything into my foundation after that. We hired 2 new attorneys, opened another office in Buffalo, and partnered with a college program to offer internships for undergrad social work students. I started writing a book, a memoir, not a self-help guide. Something honest. Messy. Real. The kids noticed the change in me too. Alina, now 22, told me during a walk in Prospect Park that she'd been thinking of applying to law school. When I asked why, she shrugged and said, "You made me believe I could fight for something and win." I held it together until I got home, then cried in the kitchen like a faucet someone forgot to shut off. Brennan was quieter, always has been, but he started sitting with me during late-night grant calls, sometimes asking questions, other times just listening. One night, he stayed up with me until 2 a.m. helping sort out invoices for a client emergency fund. He said, "I don't remember Dad ever working this hard. Not for anything that helped people." That one stuck. The world didn't stop being cruel just because I found my footing. We still lost a client last fall, a woman named Farah, who had gone back to her husband after we'd spent 6 weeks helping her file for custody. 2 months later, he killed her. We held a vigil for her outside family court. I spoke briefly, but I couldn't get through my speech without choking up. Afterward, I stood on the sidewalk and thought, this is what all of it is for. Not the galas. Not the speeches. Not even the redemption. It's a fight. Not every win is glamorous. Not every day feels powerful. Sometimes you just sit with grief and keep the engine running because people are still counting on you. And in the quiet moments, when the apartment is dark, and the kids are asleep, and I'm sitting by the window with a mug of tea, I think about that night. About Fiona's whisper. About the banner with my name on it. And I remind myself, I didn't climb into this world by accident. I built it. Brick by brick. Speech by speech. Life by life. I wasn't out for blood. I wasn't plotting some Shakespearean revenge where the villain is ruined and the audience erupts in applause. That kind of drama belonged in movies, not real life. Real revenge, at least the kind that mattered to me, was slower. Subtler. It looked like outgrowing the people who once made you feel small. It looked like thriving so unapologetically that they had to squint to keep up. Still, life handed me a few moments that tasted like justice. About 9 months after the gala, I was invited to speak at a closed-door conference on women's legal equity, held at the New York Bar Association. Small audience, big names. I wasn't even the keynote, just part of a 3-person panel. But afterward, the president of the NYBA herself approached me and asked if I'd consider serving on a steering committee for a new statewide initiative. It was volunteer, of course, but it came with one big perk: visibility. Influence. Access to the kind of decision-making table I'd spent most of my life shut out from. I accepted. 2 weeks later, I was invited to a private fundraising dinner. Just 30 people. Old money and new power. And wouldn't you know it, sitting 2 seats down from me at that long, dimly lit oak table was none other than Fiona. Her firm, or rather, the luxury PR agency she now advised, was trying to expand its philanthropic wing, and this dinner was their foot in the door. She wore a sleek black blazer, gold earrings, and that trademark smile that always hovered just a little too long. When the chair of the committee introduced me as one of our newest members, a powerhouse in legal advocacy, I watched Fiona's face freeze. Just slightly. She recovered quickly, but the flicker of recognition and discomfort was unmistakable. She didn't speak to me during dinner. But when the formalities wrapped, she made her way over with a flute of champagne in hand. "Noelle," she said, that practiced elegance still in place. "It's incredible to see how far you've come." I smiled. "Thank you. It's been a long road." She hesitated, then added, "I hope there's no bad blood between us. We've both grown. And in this world, relationships matter. I think we could really help each other now." I tilted my head slightly, studying her. The old me would have nodded. Would have said, of course, even while my stomach churned. But not anymore. "Fiona," I said, gently but clearly, "you're right. Relationships do matter. That's why I've learned to only build them with people who see my worth before the world does." She blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, the beginning of a retort, or maybe a defense, but I touched her arm lightly and smiled. "I wish you well, truly. But I've spent enough of my life chasing rooms where I wasn't welcomed. Now I build my own." And then I walked away. Not with anger. Not with gloating. Just peace. That moment stayed with me. It was the exhale I didn't know I'd been holding for 20 years. In the months that followed, I continued growing the foundation. We opened 2 more offices, one in Richmond, one in New Haven. I hired a media consultant to help amplify our work, not because I needed attention, but because we were helping women in ways no one else was, and I didn't want it hidden anymore. Patrick sent a long email at one point. It came after a piece in the Times about our work with incarcerated mothers gained some traction. He congratulated me, said he was proud, and mentioned that he'd always known I had potential. I didn't respond. Alina graduated from Columbia Law last spring. She gave a commencement speech. Halfway through, she looked out at the crowd and said, "Everything I know about justice, about advocacy, I learned from my mother. She didn't just teach me how to fight, she showed me why it matters." I cried so hard I thought I might choke. Brennan held my hand the whole time. I still live in the same brownstone in Park Slope. Still walk to the farmer's market on Sundays. Still get teary-eyed when I read our client testimonials. My life isn't perfect. It isn't easy. But it's mine. And Fiona? She's still on the edges. Occasionally her name shows up in industry newsletters or social announcements. Her firm has pivoted again, this time to cause-driven branding, whatever that means. She's still trying to stay relevant in a world that's evolving faster than she can. I don't hate her. I don't think about her often. But sometimes, when I see my name on a program, or walk into a room where I'm no longer the plus one, but the reason people showed up, I remember her whisper at that gala. "You don't belong here with these people." And I smile, not out of spite, but with a kind of quiet triumph. Because she was right, I didn't belong. I was meant to lead. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all.